9 million acres of forest, 1,700 miles of continuous shoreline, 4,300 lakes, 12,000 miles of streams, more than 300 waterfalls, 15 counties, 2 time zones, and 1 area code. Welcome to the Upper Peninsula. Welcome to 906 Outdoors. Labor Day has come and gone, and Halloween is just around the corner. The leaves have finished their transformation and dropped to the ground. For some, it's a sad time of year. The progression of fall tells us that summer is over and reminds us of the upcoming season of snow. But for some, it's the greatest time of year.
When I got just enough time to come down here after work, I run as fast as I possibly can down this hill just to be able to get that last hour and a half, 2 hours worth of daylight in every hole I can hit.
This is the time of year when brown trout make their annual run from the cold waters of Lake Superior up streams and rivers in search of a place to deposit their next generation.
This is definitely where we start our adventure.
I spent the morning on a quiet Lake Superior tributary with brown trout fanatic Matt Ellsworth, who indeed appreciates this time of year and the magic of the fall run of brown trout.
Today we're fishing for hopefully for some fall run browns, and we're going to be using some hard tackle for them. We're going to be retrieving this Rapala right here. Fire Tiger jointed, suspended. I like the suspended action because if you get done cranking, it can still stay below the surface. It doesn't sink or float, so it stays right in one position. I caught a brown on this lure on Lake Superior, and I thought, if it works for the browns out there, it should work for the browns up here. Easy as that. It's nothing the old school dudes would use, but I don't spend too much time in the little holes. I just want to be able to take advantage of every cast I can, so I try to use every hole I can. But once we get to the deeper, slower holes is where I like to start putting a little more time into it. These fish are swimming upstream from Lake Superior, and they want to do what they have to do in order to survive as a species, which is spawn. So the male and female brown trout are coming up here, and they're going to try and pair up, at least pair up, and then they're going to try and get some spawning done, and then that's about it. Now, one of the main ingredients of being able to catch fall run fish is placing your cast in the best position that it can possibly go. You want that first cast in every hole to be the most important cast, because usually when you're fishing hard baits or crankbaits, that's the one that's going to get the fish. It's your first cast, so you want to treat it like it's the most important cast there is. This is easily a 35-mile run from Lake Superior. They actually, what I was just reading the other night about brown trout is that they can actually move up to 4 miles in an evening. After dark, they can move 4 miles in one night to be able to get where they're going. Come on, you little buggers. So it doesn't take long. These fish start showing up in your fall rivers, or the fall run fish, they start showing up in as early as August. And then they start moving a little bit harder during October, and then they just try to find the best place for them to be able to spawn, lay their eggs, so that they can fertilize and not get gobbled up by predators like little brookies and minnows. And that's why I like using a Rapala, is because these fish think that this Rapala is a little minnow that's going to come and eat their eggs. And I think that's why they want that out of their hole or off their bed, is because they don't want this interfering with their spawning activity. And hopefully we can make one of them think that we're going to be interfering with their spawning activity today. And they're going to try and get caught by me. Right here's a good part of the hole. My favorite cast, it's just a slight angle cast upstream like this. And then I like that lure to be able to go down with the current slightly towards me, because I think that's a little bit more natural for a small bait fish to be able to do versus going up the current. I do not catch that many fish when I'm on the upside of the current of my lure, because you have so many sticks to contend with, snags and everything. The fish will take you through the brush. So what I like to use is I like to use a little bit heavier line. I like to use 10-pound Berkley XT because it's super abrasion resistant. So when you're dragging your line across those stumps time and time again and your lure is getting hooked up, it doesn't fray as easily. It's a very durable line, and the fish tend to pull you through the stumps and do whatever they can do to get off your line when you're catching them. So you want to have something that's super abrasion resistant. And another part is you want to have a rod that can back your line. And I like to use these Fenwicks HMXs. I like a medium heavy because I want the rod to fight the fish. I want that fish to come out of the water. I want it to be on the surface as soon as possible, and I want to be dragging it close to me or close to the shore so I can scoop it up or kick it on the bank. And you have to have a good strong rod. If you're using a noodly, like a light action rod or anything like that, the fish is going to be able to do what it wants with your rod, and it's going to be able to fight you, and it's going to get you down in them sticks and stumps and everything that you're trying to avoid. And then it'll end up snagging you up or breaking your line off on the stump. When the sun starts to come out and it starts hanging a little bit high, it starts putting shadows in everywhere. So you can make a mistake by casting your shadow down in the hole. And then what it does is, since so much of that light is penetrating the hole, it makes those fish want to take cover. So then they take cover as far as they can up in the brush and the undercuts, just to be able to stay out of it so they can stay away from predators like eagles and otters and everything else that can pick them up easily in the sunlight. So the browns typically do like a little bit darker part of the day. Thick overcast is usually great for brown trout fishing. They usually have no problem hanging out and being reactive all day on a thick overcast, just because that sun isn't out. Fishing around these logs it's basically exactly what we were talking about earlier with that lateral line. These logs are like little arms and fingers for them fish to be able to feel the vibrations of someone walking on them or something like that. So you don't want to walk on the logs and broadcast your noise to the fish. You want to actually stay clear of them and don't use the logs to walk on or anything like that until you're done casting the hole out, because otherwise you'll just be sending those vibrations to the water and spooking the fish. Every hole is different where them fish are going to be sitting in that hole. Sometimes they're at the top side of the hole. Sometimes they're at the bottom side of the hole. Sometimes they're not in the hole at all. Sometimes they're sitting right in 12 inches of water underneath some undercut brush. Every hole is so different. You got to figure out what cast is going to work for what hole. You basically want to start at the top side of the hole in the run area, and then you want it to be able to drop down into the hole and work the entire hole. And then every single cast you make is a different cast, so you can cover different sections of that hole. You want to be able to pattern out like a line grid, so that when you start, your first cast might end up over there and you go through there. Then your second cast even closer yet, and then your third cast and fourth cast. So you cover every foot of the hole. It's not the fishing, it's not the catching at all. It's actually just being here and doing it. That's what I love the most about this river. Catching fish, to me, basically is just like it's like a byproduct of enjoying fishing. And that's all it really is.
Today's show is brought to you in part by Rapid River Knife Works, home of Michigan's largest custom knife factory showroom. Today's Wild Game Break is brought to you by Cooking Wild Seasonings. Thinking about putting in a food plot? Here's some advice on what to plant.
For your perennial plots, which is going to come up every year, and you put in your clovers or alfalfa, you always want to plant a nurse crop. And in this field, we planted oats. They're basically overstory of your clovers and your alfalfa that are down below, and it's nursing these young plants to help them grow. It gives them a little bit of shade. The perennial plot typically lasts 3 to 5 years with annual mowings and fertilizer applications. You always want to have a cover crop. Now, I prefer to do oats because it's not as aggressive as rye. You can use rye as a cover crop, but you do not want to use the full recommended per acre rate. Usually I'm going to do maybe 30 to 40% of what the recommended rate is per acre if you use rye. But if you're going to use oats, you can use the recommended rate as a cover crop when you're planting it with your clover, alfalfas, or chicories.
Oh, little guy just. You see this little guy? It's a nice typical German style brown, just a little guy. He was probably in here in the river the whole summer, the whole year. He probably wasn't lake run at all. He just wanted to join in the activities and see if he can't get his groove on with the ladies. To anybody else's standards, beautiful brown trout. People travel hundreds of miles to be able to catch one specimen like this. Nice little brown. He is a nice little fish. That'd be a good one for eggs and hash browns in the morning. Everybody loves a little brown trout, and he is anxious to get back in the river, so I don't want to make him wait too long. Let's see what we got right here. Let's go like this for you, okay? Go back to your home, you little guy. Get a lot bigger so we can catch you later on in life. What drives me to come out here and fish for these fish every fall, all fall long, is because when I was a little kid, my dad would take me down to this river. And there was one point in time where I actually got to see him catch and land a huge fish. And I don't know what it was all about, but it was my birthday that day, and I didn't get to catch a fish near the size of the one he got. And I remember being a little kid and getting back to the house, and I was so frustrated at not being able to catch a fish like that I actually cried over the situation. And that embedded something right into my soul that made me want to come back here until I caught a fish like that. And the more I fished, the more successful I became with catching, and the more successful I became with spotting the fish and learning what types of lures work best for me. And another reason that keeps me coming back here is I am a local. It is right in my backyard. This is basically in my genetics. I've been fishing this river my whole life. I have a camp right off this river, and it's what I absolutely live for the entire year. The rest of the time, I'm just practicing to become a better brown trout fisherman by catching other fish. But this is what I live for all year long.
Dominic, my son here, his first goose hunt with the gun, actually shooting today, and first bird, he knocked her right down, did a good job. He's been coming with me for quite a few years now, and like I said, it's the first time shooting, so he did pretty good.
I've had the opportunity to film a few goose hunts. One thing they seem to have in common is that on each hunt, someone mentions how addicting it is. I would have to agree. I've only filmed it so far, but I find myself wanting to line up more goose hunts. What does it take to get started? Do I need 100 decoys? What about calls? Where do I set up and why? On this hunt, that's what I set out to learn.
It can be a gear intensive, but you shouldn't be intimidated by having a lot of gear. You don't need a lot of gear. Just need a couple decoys, a good spot. And the key with goose hunting, just like deer hunting and anything else, is scouting. Watch the birds, see where they're moving to. If you're hunting water or hunting a field, pattern them. Get an idea when they're moving, where they're moving to, and that's the spot you want to be. Get permission and be in that place before they move, and have the right size shot that you're capable of shooting. 12 gauge is fine. We had a young fellow out here today shooting a 20 gauge, and he was able to knock down a couple birds with that, no problem. Just make sure you're competent with your weapon, safe with the weapon, and go out and have fun.
No, it's nice to get out with family and friends and just enjoy being outdoors. It's not always about how many you shoot.
906 Outdoors is brought to you in part by the Island Resort and Casino.
Bet America Sportsbook at Island Resort and Casino.
What typically geese do is they roost on water at night, and a lot of times they'll feed late in the evening, so you can scout in the afternoon. And where they are in the evening, a lot of times they'll be in that spot in the morning, especially if they're in fields. And they're coming to the field to feed, especially the cereal fields or small grain fields. They're coming looking for the spent grain, is what they're doing. Occasionally, earlier in the year, you'll get them in green fields, alfalfa fields, things like that. But a lot of times as the fall goes on, they start hitting the oat fields, the wheat fields, and the barley fields. And then late, when the corn comes off, is when they start really using the picked corn fields. There's a lot of cover in cornfields. It's a lot easier to hunt. You don't need to have blinds and all that stuff. A lot of times, if the corn's standing, you can hide in the corn. It makes it a little easier for people to get into it. Shoot. Got one. You know, I like to use a flag a lot. The movement, that's the flag we were waving around in the field. Geese see that at a distance, and it implies that geese are landing, so they're going to follow that in. And you can use that right up to where they almost come to the ground. Calling, you know, you don't have to be a world champion caller to be effective for geese. If you can just make a honk noise, a little bit of a growl to get them right when they're going to land, those can be effective. Sometimes you don't need calls. It's all about being in the right spot. That's the 90% of it, is being in the right spot. You don't have to have the fanciest decoys, just being where the geese want to be. That's the most effective thing you can do. Calling is something you need to practice with, and you want to mimic natural geese. So go out and watch them on a lake or a river someplace, or in a field. Listen to them, see what they're doing, how they talk to each other, how they respond when other geese are flying into a flock that's already on the ground. And pay attention to that. That's what you want to. You want to sound like that. You want to make them feel comfortable, so they're going to come close by. The guys, they had a combination of different models and blinds, and when they first came on the market 10 years ago, they were pretty expensive. But nowadays, they're quite reasonable and they're easy to get. The key with blinds is get one that's comfortable. Practice using it. It's a lot different hunting from a laying down position and sitting up and shooting, because the birds are going to be really close. It's hard to get used to the distance, and it takes a couple seconds to get up and be in a position to shoot. So it's good to practice that way. You know, don't just be practicing from a standing position like you would at a skeet range. It's something you need to get well versed with, and how to do it safely with the weapon, because I've seen people accidentally discharge a gun in a blind like that, and it could be dangerous. So you got to be careful with it. Well, you have to use non-toxic shot when you're hunting waterfowl anywhere in North America. So you know that can be steel shot. It can be the tungsten iron, it can be the bismuth, all the fancy shots. Generally for geese, most people are shooting BB, triple BB, something in that range, or ones. You can shoot them with 2s too, especially if you're shooting ducks at the same time. With a 20 gauge, it's hard to get the larger size shot. So typically 2s, if most people are shooting 2s with a 20 gauge. And then in that case, you don't have as much shot volume in the shell because it's smaller. Plus, you don't have as much distance with it. So you got to watch your range. And that's probably one of the most key things people do is they struggle with trying to get used to what's range. And when you put out your decoys or whatever, you use your decoys as a gauge of how far you can shoot. You don't want to shoot past 30, 35 yards. Any more than that, and you're more likely to wound a bird and lose it than you are to have a killing shot on a bird.